Folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have episode number 86 today, quantum physics and non-duality, with our guest Seth Kostek. And you can check Seth out at sethkostek.com. You can check us out at mikeandmauricemindescape.com. You can also check us out on Instagram at Mike_N_Maurice. We are also on Twitter at Mike Escape. And we are also on Facebook as well. What's going on, Seth? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Mike. How's everything over there?
Good, good. We finally were able to figure this out. We were,
Well, we'll
trying.
see. We'll see how long the connection lasts.
Yeah, this new program we're using, it's just got all these little glitches, but hopefully we can get this thing smoothed out here and get to it. And in fact, we tried earlier with Maurice and it wasn't working out well, and he had something else to do, so we thought we'd give it a shot, just you and I. But I appreciate you hanging in there and being patient.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I love to talk about this stuff. This stuff is fascinating to me, so any chance I get to talk about it, I take that opportunity.
Sure. So why don't you talk about a little bit how you got into this and your background and everything like that?
Okay. Well, I think this all started when I was very young. I was very curious about the world, so I wanted to know what it was, or what it's made out of, or why we're here. The big questions. So the route that I took to figure this out was through science. So I became a scientist. I went to Georgetown University, got an undergraduate degree in biology, and then from there to the University of California, Berkeley, and got a Ph.D. in molecular biology under Dr. Eva Nogales. So Eva's lab is really a biophysics lab where we studied electron microscopy and use it to construct three-dimensional models of different protein structures in cells that are very hard to crystallize. So it's really hard to solve their structures in any other way. Now, when I was in science and in the lab, I was operating under what pretty much everyone operates under, the paradigm of material physicalism. So I was a logical positivist. I was a rationalist. I was believing that there is a physical material world out there that we are knowing, and that consciousness was contained inside the body and produced inside the body. So this is sort of the belief system that all scientists operate under, and they get these beliefs from their world culture. So science doesn't operate outside of world culture. It operates within it. And when you break out of that belief system, when you see science and how it works, and what we're actually operating in, then you can really start to understand your circumstance. So I think the first thing most people don't understand is how science works. So and I didn't when I was in graduate school. I did not understand it. I thought science, there was a finite answer out there that you could solve and you'd have a theory of everything. That is naive. This does not work that way. And science seems to be operating under a lot of false beliefs. So there have some holdover from Darwin and Newton. They think that this is a physical material world where objects bang each other around in place, causing effects. Okay? And they don't understand the process they're using through science. They don't understand that science transacts in beliefs, concepts, and models. They think it's transacting in facts and truths. So you just have to, the first thing you have to do, if you want to try to understand what this whole thing is, you have to understand the tool that you're using to understand it. So if you don't understand science, and you're using that as a tool to understand the world or the content within experience, you're going to totally fool yourself if you have a misunderstanding of science. So the first thing is science transacts in beliefs, and most scientists will say, no, we don't. Okay, so right there, you have to understand what is the definition of belief. I mean, you can look it up on your phone right now.
Right, right.
Belief is the acceptance of a statement as is true or that something exists. So now you have to step back and say, okay, wait a minute. This is profound. I didn't really realize that that's what the definition of a belief is, because that means when you are in kindergarten and the teacher holds up, this symbol, and you look at it, it's like, oh, this is the letter A.
Right.
This is a letter A. And you accept that that symbol, the letter A, is the letter A. That's a belief.
Do you think that we kind of are here, like we're here now with, classical physics and quantum physics being on kind of two separate planes? Do you think we're here because of this material, physicalism kind of being taught in universities and like kind of what you're describing? Or do you think it's kind of like a loss of philosophy mixed in with it? Because if you look at how we got here, basically, you can trace it all the way back to the ancient Greek philosophers, the pre-Socratics, Thales and Anaximander and Parmenides and all these guys talking about crazy metaphysical stuff, and you kind of lose that through the time, and then you get to Newton and all Descartes and all those guys. Do you think that we're kind of losing the philosophical side of it, and that's why we're kind of in a standstill in terms of where we are science-wise right now?
No, see, all of those things that you said, everything you just talked about is content within experience.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing is ignoring the knowing of that content.
Sure.
So you are ignoring it because you're knowing experience through mind. So mind is the knowing of opposites. So I only know what this is by knowing that this is not that. Okay? This can never exist by itself.
Right.
It's made out of knowing that it's not that.
Right.
So content is made of knowing opposites. Now, it's not this simple because a concept in and of itself can't do nothing. You need multiple concepts so they interfere, and the squaring of finite potential gives the illusion of objects. So forget all that. Just understand that you're knowing through the mind. You're
Sure.
knowing through these opposites. Everything is constructed by these opposites. Concepts are not thoughts in a brain.
Mm-hmm.
Concepts are what is described by quantum physics. This is made out of knowing that it's not this. You could never have a this here by itself. They always come together. They're made out of each other. They're opposites. Like right now, you have a field of view. You're looking at it, right?
Right.
Everything in your field of view is determined, right?
Sure.
So you're looking at a microphone in front of you, right?
Yep.
That's a determined object.
Right.
The space between the microphone and your lips is determined that there's no objects there. That's
Right.
a void. So even the voids in front of you are determined. So in front of you, you have determined voids and determined objects. Now behind you, opposed to that, what's there? It's a blank, right? So
Right.
everything in front of you is determined and everything behind you is undetermined. So we get back to two. You can never have something that's determined if there wasn't something undetermined. They're linked.
Right.
And notice that wherever your point of view goes, the undetermined blank behind it it's bound. It's topologically bound to it. So you turn around and you determine what's behind you, but then the behind you becomes undetermined.
Sure.
So you can't get out of it. It's made out of each other. It's linked. It's like I cannot touch the tip of this finger with the tip of this finger.
Right.
I can't do it. It's bound.
Right.
So this is the thing that consciousness knowing experience through each of us does not understand, because when you have these opposites, you cannot see what they're made out of. Because, see, to know something limited, you have to have the illusion of limitation to know the limited. Something limited has the appearance of edges or bounds to it. It's made into an object. Okay, something that's unlimited has no boundaries to it. There's no edge to it.
So you mean like our consciousness?
So yes, consciousness is the only thing that's here. It's not even a thing because it's unlimited. There's no bounds to it. So it's going to be transparent. If you're knowing through the mind that is seeing limitations, and these are made out of knowing opposites, then you cannot see consciousness because it's infinite, it's transparent. It's that which is making the illusion of the opposites. So just like a paintbrush can paint a canvas, but it can't turn around and paint itself.
Right.
You see. So the thing that is knowing the content can never be an object of its own knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why people are like, whoa, what is consciousness? Where is it? You're looking right at it.
Right.
The microphone in front of you is consciousness. You're just seeing it as something finite and existing outside of consciousness. But nothing exists. This has been proven 90 years ago.
Well, I mean, lots of people have tackled this, right? I mean, throughout the years. I mean, it's the hard problem of consciousness for a reason, and even people as smart as like, you know, Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff are talking about microtubules in the brain and, you know, how that could, you know.
Oh, I know Stuart. He's been in our lab before. Him and Eva know each other.
So what
anybody that deals with microtubules, that's the lab that I was from. So Eva Nogales is the person that discovered the structure of tubulin.
Sure.
So they all know her.
Okay. So what do you think then when like so you wrote a paper. What's the name of your paper? I was actually reading a little bit of it last night.
So
let me see if I can.
I wrote this into a paper, so to be published in a scientific journal. So the paper is going to be extremely hard for anybody to understand. So it's very dense, and then it's talking about things where the paper is not a proper format for this type of discussion. You need a huge book.
Sure.
Even a book is not the right way to do this. So the proper way, once you really realize what's going on here, the proper way is a dialectic. So you have to have a dialogue with and you have to do you have to inquire. So again, belief is mission critical to this whole thing. If you read that paper, if you read any paper, if you believe the words coming out of my mouth right now, you will be totally trapped. This is what traps you in this illusion.
Sure.
Is accepting things as true instead of knowing truth itself. So to understand, to really grasp things, you have to know them. And there is only one way to know them, through experience. You have to test in experience for yourself. You have to inquire for yourself. You can't just believe content that is put in front of you. And this is the whole game.
Is your paper peer reviewed? Like, have you had somebody look at this?
No. I sent it to be peer reviewed.
Okay.
And they're like, no, this will destroy science. It's not going to destroy science. This is not. This is the fear of scientists. The scientists they have a belief in rationality. Mm-hmm. They have a belief in physicality, of existence, of something existing outside of consciousness. They fear nonsense. Mm-hmm. They fear not irrationality. Okay, but their fears are not. They're not valid. So you can still have a physics of consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's possible. It's just that the paradigm that you use to contextualize all of your scientific results will shift from material physicalism to conscious singularity, where every apparent thing is made of, in, and out of consciousness, which is what their theories are already saying.
Right.
if you ask quantum physicists, what is everything made out of? They will say limited potential. Or they'll say something like Sean Carroll, who I love, everybody's cool. I'm not picking on him, but he will say, people ask me what the electron is, and he'll say it's a cloud of probability
Right.
in space-time. So the issue is the in space-time. No, space-time is a concept that occurs within consciousness. Consciousness does not occur inside of space-time. The electron is a cloud of probability. That's all it is. There's nothing to it other than probability. So if everything is probability, then there is only probability here. That's it. They're already saying everything is infinite potential. That's what they're saying. If every single piece of matter or whatever, the thing that you think is physical and material is probability, then that's all that's here.
Right.
That's it. It's just that when you undergo the activity of making these opposites, right? This is probability over here, made out of knowing that it's not this probability over here. This probability has the illusion of something finite. Like if I want to make the number 1, the number 1 appears as a finite object. And it's made out of knowing that a 1 is not a 2, a 1 is not a 3, a 1 is not a 4, a 1 is not a 5, a 1 is not every other number. So you've got an illusion of something finite, a conceptually finite set of potential here, made out of knowing that it is not an infinite set of potential. Okay, but now this infinite set of potential is a conceptual infinity. It's not an actual infinity, because the actual infinity is both of these things. See, the actual infinity is the knowing, that is knowing the finite and knowing the infinite. So that's the actual infinite. What we do then is we pay attention to these opposites, because we can't pay attention to something that is unlimited, the unlimited thing that is informing the illusion of these limitations. We cannot see it. We cannot grasp it. It's not understandable. Even this infinite set is not understandable to us. It's transparent because it's not limited. And this should be obvious, because if you have in math class, if you accept that 1 minus infinity, you still get infinity, right?
Right.
You subtract 1 from infinity, there's still infinity. So it's just that the actual infinity contains limits that appear finite, like a 1, and limits that are conceptual infinite sets. Okay, and this is, I don't even know where we're going with this, but but this is the trick of how everything is formed. Because see, then if I want to know what a 1 is, so this concept, since there's not a 1 here standing by itself, it's literally made of knowing that it's not all these other numbers. Okay, so I've got a thing that's got 2 parts here. I've got 1 not equals 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does that make sense? Does that statement make sense? No, it makes no sense at all. 1
Right.
not equals 1. I will tell you, go and grab 1 not equals 1 chocolates right now. You can't. You don't know what I'm talking about. It makes no sense. It's an infinite statement that has both the illusion of finite and every other number. So in order to make this concept appear to stand outside of consciousness, because it's just made out of consciousness, you just have knowing a 1 and knowing that it's not 1.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to make that appear to stand outside of consciousness, you got to multiply that concept with another concept. So this is the Born rule in quantum physics.
Sure.
Square. So if this is potential and I square it, it's the illusion of limited potential. I square that potential.
Right.
I get a 1. I get an object that looks like it is determined. But there's nothing to it other than the knowing of concepts that are composited together. So all that 1 is made out of is still knowing. It just looks like it's a real thing there.
Now, was this like an epiphany that you had, or was this like an ongoing thing that you've been researching, or how did you come to these conclusions?
Well, after I left, so again, at some point, um, you got to fish or cut bait, right? So at
Sure.
some point, I realize I'm literally looking at through microscopes, down into at single. I mean, I studied RNA polymerase, so I mean, you're literally looking at like single molecular engines, right? I'm all the way looking way down in there, and at some point, I'm realizing like I am never going to figure out what all this stuff is made out of and why we're here and all of by pursuing science in this way. It's
Sure.
just not, it's not, I was like, okay, I will just publish some papers and maybe I'll learn a little bit of, how human beings believe cells work and things like that. But I won't actually find out,
Right.
you know. So when I had that epiphany, I was like, okay, I need to do something else. So I just decided to go into business. I was successful in that, and when I bought my house, I just had this huge house, and I had everything I could ever want, and just kind of sit there and say, well, now what do I really want? And the thing that I wanted most was to figure out how the double slit experiment actually works,
Oh,
because nothing, nothing that anyone uh, has written about it so far makes any sense.
sure.
And so that's what I did. I spent 4 years every night. I just come back to my house, my empty house. I still have no furniture in here. This is like the only furniture I have. So I would just come back and read papers and study. And then I started performing the double slit experiment myself with lasers and stuff and really kind of thinking about this. And then
Can,
one day, yeah, I had a breakthrough.
can you see the diagram? This is from your website I pulled up. I don't know if it's showing it on your end or not.
No,
Uh,
I don't see it, but I know my paper.
okay, so it's the one where, um, you
Still
know,
figuring over.
the physical, the lights mediating off the, or the lights bouncing off the object, which is
Okay.
in our visual realm, and then you've got the other side with the lasers and the
Yep.
yeah.
So essentially, the double slit experiment, what you're doing is you, again, we have this topology problem, right? So if I want to figure out what touching is, but I only have the tip of this finger,
Right.
right? I cannot investigate touching the tip of this finger with the tip of this finger. It's impossible. I have to touch something else, right? So vision, like we said before, you have a visual field in front of you that is determined. And now you have an undetermined blank behind you. So there's a topology there. To understand how vision works, you're going to have to take that blank behind you and put it in your visual field. So in order to do that, you got a phone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see here. So here, okay, so here you can see, well,
Right.
yeah. Okay, so I'm holding up objects. Light is bouncing off of those objects
Right.
and traversing space-time, being captured by the camera and being displayed on the screen, right?
Right.
So I've got objects, I've got light, I've got a perceiver, and oh my God, I can see the perception the perceiver is perceiving,
Right.
which I can't do if I just got myself here.
Sounds like a Dr. Seuss novel.
Yeah, so what we're able to do here is to break that typology, and then we have all the elements of visual perception
Right.
right in front of us. And now we can then look at what's happening. Does image formation, does it occur from light interacting with undetermined objects?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you are able to do with this little system. Now the problem is these fingers, they're determined
Right.
because they're in my field of view. So what I have to do is figure out how to make an undetermined object right here, shine light on it, and then look at the image that's produced. So if I take an undetermined object, so if I have 2 fingers holding, let's just say these 2 fingers were undetermined.
Right.
Right? And I shine light on them, I should see 2 fingers on the screen. If I see 12 fingers, I know light shining on undetermined objects does not determine them. Because 12 fingers does not determine 2. You would not know which of the 12 fingers, the 2 fingers, represent the 2-finger objects.
Right.
Okay, so that's what the double slit experiment is telling you. You have 2 slits. You can't determine which slit the light goes through.
Right.
You shine light on it, and you get 12 slit images. So shining light on an undetermined object does not determine it.
Right.
So you are not seeing the field of view that you have right now. You are not seeing it from light interacting with those objects, going into your eyes and knowing an image of it.
Right.
Because if you were, then the double slit experiment proves that that light does not determine undetermined objects. And then when you really look into it, then you say, okay, what's there? In this double slit experiment, determination is happening, because if I look to see which slit the light goes through, I get a determined image. If I set up a system where I can know which slit the light goes through, then I've determined an image. The image no longer is a distribution of lines. It's 2 lines.
Do you think for the double slit experiment, obviously they blast the electrons, but do you think it's possible to upscale that to larger objects? Do you think it would work the same way?
They have.
Okay.
They have. So they you can do it with anything.
Okay. I know that because I've read some stuff on that too, but I think it's considered woo-woo in some areas.
Yeah. Yeah, I just need to say something about woo-woo. So
could go preach on. I mean, we do a lot of woo-woo stuff on here, but we also do a lot of academic stuff too, so we have a little bit of a balance going on, but go ahead.
Okay, so again, and this gets back to what science is, right? So you have 3 main, let's back up. So you've got beliefs here.
Right.
Scientists don't see that their field is working with beliefs, but it is, because science is an epistemological modality.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 main ones: religion, philosophy, and science.
Right.
So these modalities, they don't look at facts and truths. They are trying to, epistemology, in case people don't understand what that is, it's the investigation of what is justified belief versus opinion. So this is why epistemology is huge, because if all we have are beliefs, if everything is a statement that you have accepted, then we need to figure out which beliefs are valid. Because if we don't know which beliefs are valid, then we'll be living our entire apparent life under some delusion.
Right.
Okay, so science is one of the 3 epistemologies. It's dealing in beliefs. It does not deal in facts and truths. So religion justifies belief with belief.
Right.
That's what it does. Okay? So when you are a scientist, okay, well, let's go through the 3. So religion justifies belief with belief. Logic justifies belief with rationality. Philosophy justifies belief with rationality or logic.
Right.
And science justifies belief with experience. So now a scientist hearing a statement and saying, this is woo-woo. Did they do an experiment to come to that conclusion?
No. They're just basing it off of previous.
They just practiced what? Did they practice science? No. Did they practice philosophy? No. What did they practice? What did they just practice?
Epistemology?
No, religion. They practiced religion.
Oh, never mind. I got confused.
They're saying this is woo-woo.
Right.
Based on what? The belief that it's woo-woo.
So,
Now,
I mean,
my
I've heard that before that, like a lot of people talk about that, how science is basically just the religion of reality, basically, or
well,
or the idea that for sure the future is going to behave the same way as the past, kind of a thing, that somewhere in that realm.
no. See, science. It's. There's a. You have to have some subtlety and nuance. So science, it starts with these beliefs, and it performs logically constrained tests of them,
Mm-hmm.
and then you write down your interpretation of what happens within the actuality of experience. Somebody reads your scientific paper, and now they have another belief, because accepting a statement, even if it's a scientific paper, is the definition of belief. So it starts with beliefs, processes stuff, you get a belief out. So it only works with beliefs, but these
Isn't it?
beliefs are special because they're justified via experience.
But isn't this the idea too? That I mean, what we know to be certain today is probably not going to be certain. People are going to look hundreds of years from now and be like, "Oh, they thought that." Like even the way we look at Newton and his idea of gravity is not our idea of gravity today. That kind of a thing.
So no, what you just said is what people believe. What we know is uncertain. So the knowing is certain because it's infinite potential.
Right.
The content that we're knowing is uncertain
I mean, yeah, I was just
because it
talking
is
about
limited.
like
No,
Thomas
but
Thomas Kuhn's idea of like paradigm shifts and scientific revolutions and that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. So, but this is exactly it. So the content is uncertain because it's limited potential. It's always going to change. It is relative. It is it is not the actual. It is
Okay.
not what's really here. What's really here is the knowing. The
Sure.
knowing of that content is what's actual. If the mass of the microphone sitting in front of you is conceptual, you know this because it's relative.
Right.
Mass is not the same. If you accelerate to near the speed of light, that thing is going to get really massive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not one mass. It's not a fixed thing. It is a relativistic construct that you're making. Not you, Mike, you, the consciousness that is knowing the concepts that constitute Mike.
Right.
And so what you've done is you've confused Mike for who you are, but you're not. You're consciousness.
Right. And but in that regard, then would we all? That's what you're saying by non-duality. Like then we are all consciousness. We are all the same thing.
There is only consciousness here.
Okay.
Consciousness ignores its infiniteness to know something finite.
So then, what would you say the reason is for this illusion of, separation or duality or whatever you want to say?
Well, there isn't any. You just are fooling yourself that there is.
Gotcha. But that's what I'm saying. Like,
There's
why, from like a biological I know you know where we're going with this, obviously, but I just want to understand how you would arrive at that from an understanding, like biologically, of how we work. Or you're saying that that doesn't matter, and it's really just this other thing.
biologically how we work is a little fairy tale that consciousness has invented.
Okay.
Now, the invention of it isn't like some.
I mean, I understand like
It's
language, like we've created language, and language we're just adding titles to things that aren't real. Like we've invented everything that we know to be true, basically. Like the concept of seeing something and whatever the experience. I understand that, but I was just curious on. I mean, I guess I understand your take on this. I'm just trying to understand it, how you arrived at this, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out.
So how you arrive at it is when you look at the double slit experiment and you realize that light shining on objects does not determine them, but determination is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Then now you have to figure out how it actually is determined. How once you prove that you're not seeing objects from light shining on them, then you've got to figure out how are you seeing them? Because you are seeing them.
Right.
I mean, you cannot deny that you're seeing what look like objects to you.
But
So how is that actually occurring?
how did you
That's
arrive at that? I guess is what, like, did you do
so
thought experiments, or like, are you thinking like what would happen if there was no light, or like
no,
something along the?
you just write it down. So you say, okay, in this double slit experiment, I go from a determined image of 2 lines
Right.
to an undetermined image of 12 or 36 line, an interference pattern, right? Okay,
Right.
so what you've got to figure out is how did that happen? How did that switch? How does that switch between 2 lines and 12 lines?
Right.
Okay, so then what do you have there? So you have the only thing that's there is you got a photon. You just write this down. I got a photon. Okay, I've got a slit that's known, and I've got a slit that's unknown.
Right.
So if I have 2 slits and I shine light through it, I have unknown slit. If I have 1 slit, or I can determine which slit, I have a known slit. So then you realize, okay, you've written these 3 things down. You've written known slit, you've written unknown slit, you've written photon, and now you start to realize, okay, what is a known slit? What is it? It is made of knowing that it's not unknown slit. Oh, this thing that I thought was a thing, a existent object, is a concept.
So it's almost like these two things are just like canceling each other out, basically.
So wait. So you figure out that known slit and unknown slit is a concept.
Right.
Now let's look at the second thing that you've written down. You've written down photon. That's the only other thing there. Okay. Well, now if a concept is made out of these opposites, there's got to be an opposite to the photon. You only could see the photon because you don't even pay attention to what not photon is.
Right.
Oh, okay. So I will take photon, not photon, and make that into a concept. Now you see the photon isn't a thing. It is a concept. A photon is limited potential that is made out of knowing that it's not photon.
Mm-hmm.
So now when you look at image formation, you say, oh, okay, so how is this image formed? When you multiply these concepts together, when you multiply an unknown slit times a photon,
right,
you get a unknown distributed line pattern.
Sure.
Okay, so this is what everything's made of, these concepts. That's what you figure out.
So, I mean, so then when you look at like the universe, then is consciousness then, because there's some people, pantheism and all these different theories, and if everything is one, and Hindu, beliefs, and so I guess what I'm asking is, how does this relate to the universe? Does this consciousness that's just one thing arise biologically for things that are biological, or is it something that is encompassed or encoded within the entire universe?
No, see, the entire universe occurs inside of consciousness.
Okay.
It's made of it. So, again...
So this is kind of like, have you ever heard of, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I read a book, I think it's called Biocentrism by Dr. Robert Lanza, and his theory is kind of similar, but it's not about like non-duality and stuff. It's more about how consciousness arises through biology, and that the universe exists basically because we exist.
Yeah, I understand what people are saying by all that, but they're missing the whole thing.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, so consciousness doesn't arise. It's all that's here. It's been here forever, and it can't go anywhere, and because that's all there, it's all there's here. And it's dimensionless. It has no dimensions to it. It's unlimited. So that which is infinite has no limitations. There's no edge to it or anything. It's infinite. It's transparent. It's always been here. It's always in the now. It's knowing. That's what's happening. So what's happening is this consciousness, when it starts undergoing this activity of mind, making these opposites, and they multiply each together, it makes the illusion of finite interference products, but it also makes the illusion of infinite interference products. So the Born rule states, when you square finite limited potential, you get the illusion of an object. but you're also multiplying the infinite sets, which you cannot grasp. So if I multiply, 1 times 2, you are just looking at a 1 and a 2, and then
Right.
you say, oh, I get a 2 out.
Right.
That's not what's happening. You're multiplying 1 not equals 1 times 2 not equals 2. So in that multiplication, you get 4 products out. You get a 1
Right.
times 2 equals a 2. You get a 1 times not equals 2, which equals not equals 2, but you can't grasp what a not equals 2 is.
Right.
It's infinite. It's transparent to you, so you don't even see it.
Right.
You get a not equals 1 times a2, which again is infinite. You cannot see it, so you just ignore that. You get a not equals 1 times a not equals 2. So you just can't, there's a not even there. So the only thing you see from 1 not equals 1 times 2 not equals 2 is the 2. That's all you see. So likewise, when you multiply these concepts that consciousness is knowing, you get a universe. You're looking at a finite product set, but there are 3 more sets that you're not seeing because they're infinite. You're not grasping them. They're there, but if you say the 2 fundamental concepts. So again, this thing is infinite. So consciousness can abstract itself into every single possibility there is. You sum these conceptual possibilities up into 2 separate concepts. So now these things are stacks of some potential. And when you multiply them together, you get a universe. So if these 2 summed stacks of potential, if I call one the concept of knowing, not equals knowing, and the concept of being, not equals being, when I multiply these things together, I get the universe, which is knowing being, and I get something else that's knowing not equals being. And then I get something else, not equals knowing being. And then I get something else, not equals knowing, not equals being.
Mm-hmm.
So the universe, the thing that you can see, is this illusion of finite content. Antimatter, which is not equals being times knowing, is being that's there that you can't know. And then dark energy, well, this is not equals knowing, not equals being. It's not being anything that you can't know.
Right.
And dark matter is being there that you can't know. So this is why you're never going to find dark matter or dark energy as an object, because they are infinite. They're right here. They're right on top of you right now. You're the whole infinite singularity. You're looking right at it right now. It's just that you've limited every single concept. You've limited by knowing through the illusion of Mike. You have limited it, because a Mike is knowing that it's not Mike. Notice that your perspective, no other perspective has your perspective.
Right.
Because they're made out of knowing that they're not you. So nobody can ever have your point of view. And by definition, since this is an infinite singularity, there has to be a Mike here. Because if there wasn't, then this thing wouldn't be infinite. So congratulations, you are the whole thing.
So in that regard, then what does this mean? Like, so, we just talked a little bit basically about, you were talking about like ontology, basically, with the being, not being kind of a thing. How does this play into what's the point? What's the purpose? Like, what do you think's going on then? Okay, or is purpose something that we just subscribe to that we don't really?
The truth is that the real, there is, you have to have the illusion of finite to have meaning or anything. You can make up meaning for whatever you want to do. You can know any meaning for your life that you want. This thing that consciousness is so far beyond meaning. It's the most meaningful thing that there could be. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's beyond logic. It takes logic and it's like,
right.
This thing it's infinite, people do not have an understanding what infinite is. They think infinite means really large. No, infinite means unlimited. Anything. It can do anything, and it is doing everything. And so there is no meaning, and the only meaning that I can really, if I'm looking at what is here, right? I'm looking at finite objects or the illusion of finite objects, right? But what's really here is the infinite. So what's going on? I am ignoring the infinite. So the meaning or the purpose or the intent seems to be to ignore myself, to have a diversion from the infinite.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look up what a game is, it's an engagement, something engaged as a diversion or for amusement.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in some sort of game here. You're ignoring yourself so that you can see something that appears to be other than yourself. And I can only assume that, being infinite and existing for eternity, or not existing, being in eternity forever, never, 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 never. You're gonna want to do some other things. So you're gonna want to play these games.
So do you think that that's why in religion you have this idea? There's some, esoteric stuff too that talks about how, we are all one, or we are all God, and we created fractals of himself. And even Gnosticism talks about being trapped in this body as a piece of this bigger one thing kind of a thing. Do you think that there's something to that, or do you think it's not really like that at all, or what's your take on all that?
No, you're God.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So okay. So let's say I die. So then the show goes on and it's just
so
business as usual, but it's not me.
When you say I die,
so
who's dying?
Okay. So we talked about this.
The content is dying.
Right.
The content will go away.
Right.
It'd be ignored. But the I that's knowing that content, all there is here. So you can't go anywhere.
But that's what I'm saying. So if I were to die, my consciousness would live on. Would I then have the information encoded in that, or would that be something that just dissipates when I die?
So information is knowing that it's not equals information, right?
Right.
So something that is in formation, it's formed, it's finite.
Right.
So something that's not formed is infinite. You are this infinite, non-informed thing.
Right.
This fist here is the illusion of information. It's consciousness that's infinite, but this infinite is it looks like it's taking a form because I'm ignoring the unlimited part and just paying attention to the limits. So information is what when you have your field of view, you are creating information. You are taking infinite consciousness, which is infinite, transparent. It's the blank behind you right now, right? The blank behind you is out of formation, right? It's occurring. There's something back there. It is, but it's not informed. It's there. It's transparent. But when I turn around and I look at it, now I inform it.
Mm-hmm.
So information just arises from this little game, this game of playing that one is not equals one. This little game of knowing opposites creates the illusion of information. So you just go back to being infinite consciousness, which has no form, which is all knowing.
So that's what basically you could say consciousness is God then, because that's what people have described God as since the beginning, which is omnipotent, all-knowing, ever-present, the Alpha, the Omega, all that.
The reason why I don't like to use the word God,
yeah, because
several reasons, because I was an atheist for my whole life, so it's just weird to me to say it. And then two, people have a cartoon notion of God.
Yeah,
God
like Zeus, like a Zeus character sitting up in the clouds looking down.
Yes, and then these these crazy international, or what do they call themselves, the intellectual dark web. These guys,
Yeah.
they get up there and they do the exact thing that they hate other people doing, is they straw man some religious person's notion of God. They'll say, well, you believe God is a guy with a beard and in this cartoon version of God. And then they say, well, you're ridiculous for believing that. No, that is ridiculous. I don't think people with a serious, sophisticated, again, you can't have an understanding of God. There's no understanding of it. But people who understand and can point and say, yeah, God is this infinite thing. It's not a cartoon. It is not anything that could be limited to anything. So you'll see these atheists get up there and say, well, show me a God. Show me this bearded guy in the sky. It's like, no, you're totally dismissing something, and you're mischaracterizing the other person's statements, and then you're saying those statements are stupid. No. Understand what they're trying to tell you, and then analyze it. They're doing the exact thing that they hate.
Right.
When Richard Dawkins says, yeah, point God out to me, it's like, you're staring right at him. Who do you think you are?
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Everything you're looking at is God. There's nothing other than God here. Everything, yes.
The only thing I don't understand about his arguments, too, is that he believes in evolution, but it's like, what would the purpose of evolution be if it's constantly moving in a direction? And I get that this doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about right now, but just that something's trying to survive. Why is it trying to survive? Why is it going in one direction? Like, what would the point be? So
they use meaninglessness when it suits them.
Right.
So they'll say, like, yeah, there is no teleology. There's no point. It's just doing this thing. It's
right.
Meaningless. But then they want to say life has this meaning.
Or Lawrence Krauss. Lawrence Krauss gets me too. Nothing, something from nothing, like that kind of stuff. I just can't.
No.
Yeah.
The idea that there's nothing here is false. Nothing is a concept. It's nothing not equals nothing.
Right.
What is making nothing? There has to be something to make nothing. The thing that's making nothing is not a thing. That's the problem. It's not an object that you can grasp, so you don't see it. It's the being that is consciousness, that is knowing nothing. Mm-hmm. And how does it know that there's a nothing? Because it knows what not nothing is. It's making a nothing out of knowing that it's something. So this nothing something is a concept. It's occurring in consciousness. You don't get being out of nothing. Being is already being. It's already knowing. It's a knowing being.
So what about like altered conscious states? So like, you obviously come from a background in biology. I don't know if you're familiar with the recent studies with inducing cardiac arrest in rats, and then producing dimethyltryptamine in their brains, not just in their pineal glands. Like stuff like that, like serotonin stuff playing off the 5-HTP, a 2A receptor, and that kind of stuff. Also near-death experiences. What do you think's going on there? Do you think you're getting a glimpse of what losing this built-in pareidolia or built-in illusion or something along those lines?
Well, so you're knowing an infinite number of limited potential right now. You're knowing all these concepts, right? And so in order to know anything finite, you have to limit it. So this limiting activity that consciousness is doing, right, is making you seem extremely limited. Now, if you do psychedelics or practice meditation, you start removing limits, or you flip them so that the finite limits that are interfering with you, now you have the infinite limit set on the other side. So remember, 1 was a finite set. Not equals 1 was an infinite set. If I flip this concept so that now the infinite set is interacting with all the other limits that you're knowing, well, now that's transparent to you. The little one is now, you're ignoring it. And you're paying attention to the infinite set, which doesn't limit you. Mm-hmm. It starts to unlimit you. So the more limits you can take off, which this is what's opening the mind up is, right? But be careful, it's infinite in there. You're hiding from yourself on purpose. So once you start opening up that mind and you start seeing how unlimited this is, it's going to scare the shit out of you.
That's what people describe under, I've done other psychedelics. I've never tried DMT, but people that do DMT talk about kind of this, kind of what you're talking about. It's almost like a lifting of the veil, or, a lot of people talk to these entities when they're in there. Like, could these entities just be other illusions that you are, like maybe the dude behind the game for somebody else or something along those lines,
Yeah, so the problem is that I can't understand consciousness as an object. I can't understand it. So just like you have the universe, which is conceptual interference of a finite set, it's like I can grasp this. Okay. Now the three other infinite sets, once you start unlimiting yourself, I don't know, like, do you go into one of these other three sets of potential? Do you go into the infinite potential? What part of, are you seeing part of my, I don't know. I have no clue. Like,
right.
Once you start going infinite, all bets are off. I cannot grasp it as an object to know anything about it that I could tell you, because all these words are finite constructs. They're not, these words, the image that you're knowing and the words coming out of my mouth and the thoughts that you are knowing right now are all content. They're just like one frame in a celluloid movie, and you're knowing that one frame, and then you're knowing the next frame, and then you're in the next frame. They're not like, there's not an independent thinker here thinking thoughts.
Right.
It's all in one frame. And so the frame that we use to describe this is Planck's constant. Planck's constant is your frame. It's your quantum of action. It is the what you've termed the interference. So this whole universe, everything finite that you can see in it, is Planck's constant. You're seeing it at one Planck's constant at a time, one Planck length time. I don't know how do you want to say that, but you're just seeing this frame, okay? All other frames are currently occurring, but you have limited yourself from viewing them. You do not see them because you are knowing limitation. You're not being unlimited. You can't see everything. And then when you are unlimited, you're not able to see them as things because you're infinite. And the infinite can only know the infinite. The infinite cannot know the finite. So you can only know the illusion of finite.
That actually makes sense, because when people come back from DMT trips, like we've interviewed a lot of people that have gone deep down the DMT rabbit hole, and also I've interviewed a lot of people that have had near-death experiences, one of which including my mom, who passed away for 3 minutes, giving birth to one of my sisters, and claims to have seen, family members and stuff like that. And they all describe this kind of state as, you can't really describe it. Like there's no words.
Yeah,
so
it's not limited.
Right. So that would make sense in terms of what you're saying, because since we make up these constructs with words and ideas and different things, that when you experiencing not having that, you can't really describe it because it's uncharted territory, basically.
Yeah, it's just the mechanics of knowing finite don't allow you to do that. So the real craziness of it, the real thing that you can awaken from this. You can be looking right at your screen right now, seeing it as a screen and seeing yourself as a human and seeing these images. You can flip that and you can see it as infinite consciousness itself. You can stop paying attention to the limiting activity and pay attention to the thing that is creating that limiting activity and see through the concepts, because the concepts are just made out of knowing.
Right.
They're just made out of knowing of opposites. They're vaporware. They're not actually there. They're conceptually there. And so you're just looking at all this and you can just flip it and see it as infinite consciousness. And when that happens, that will scare the shit out of you. You will be like, oh my God, there was never, ever a difference between the physical material world and the consciousness knowing it. It was always the same thing. And this thing that I'm looking at is myself. It is what I always was, and there never was a little separate Seth sitting here. I was always this thing the whole time.
Right.
And that is a huge shocker for people. They just cannot. It's just very hard to accept.
So, yeah, because it seems like to understand what you're saying, which I kind of think I have a tenuous grasp on right now, but it's almost like you have to unlearn everything you knew to know this. And
Correct.
I thought the last great truth was, I think, therefore I am, Descartes' cogito. But it seems like you take a step back from that even, and it's, I'm there's nothing. It's knowing that there's nothing, and that the only thing there is consciousness. And even though I think, therefore I am not one thing. I am everything.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been there with Descartes to actually know what he was actually saying. I think things get lost in I mean, that was in French, right? So, or
well, yeah, I mean,
I wrote it in Latin, and then it was translated. This is the thing: when he's saying "I think, therefore I am," I don't think he means think.
Okay.
And no one can really debate this because he's not around.
Right.
So, I think what he's saying is "I am, therefore I am." So again, where does that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I've read his.
That's in the Bible, there. Guys.
Yeah, I've read his meditations, and he was also fascinated with he built, I think, an automaton when that was kind of unheard of, back in the day, because he lost his daughter, I believe. She died at an early age, and he tried to make an automaton to kind of recreate. So I think he was fascinated with consciousness in general.
Ray Kurzweil all over again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
His dad died. He's trying to recreate him. So it's.
What do you think about that? I mean, I know you have your theory on stuff, but what do you think about possibility of simulation theory, or that we can?
You have to understand. I mean, actually, this is going to be episode 7. So I'm going to make an episode on what a simulation is versus what an illusion is. So,
right.
So here's the thing, and this is something that you just have to start doing. Look up the definitions to everything you say, because when you say a simulation, you don't even know what you're saying.
Right.
When someone says this is an illusion, I think most people think that they're saying it's not really here. It's a phantom.
Well, I think for simulation...
Illusion does not mean phantom.
Right.
It means misinterpretation. So you're looking at the thing. The thing is really there. It's just that you're interpreting it incorrectly.
Well, for simulation to be a simulation, there has to be the actual version of that thing first, right? So
correct. So a simulation is a mimic.
Right.
It is not the thing that it's simulating.
Right. So illusion would be a better word when trying to describe.
Well, it can get confusing.
Yeah.
Because you could have, it can get confusing. So let's just look at a flight simulator. So there's a little box on the ground with a joystick.
Mm-hmm.
That is simulating a real flying airplane, right?
Right.
The box and the joystick is not the plane. It's not. They're two different things. One is mimicking the other, but one is not the other.
Right.
Now, an illusion would be you're in the plane and you're really flying it. And you think it's a plane. But what's really there is knowing. What's really there is consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You're misinterpreting the plane and the experience. You're misinterpreting consciousness for that finite stuff. So an illusion and a simulation are not the same thing. And so just notice this. I mean, how many simulations are going on right now? I mean, there's probably some dude training how to drop bombs on Syria in some flight simulator, right?
Right.
So you're not knowing that. Why not? Because you have to bring your knowing to the simulation.
Mm-hmm.
If you put VR gear on right now, you are already knowing. Knowing is occurring. You put the VR gear on, and then you know the simulation, but the knowing is never simulated. The knowing is prior to content. The knowing is all there is. So you can't simulate knowing.
Right.
The knowing, and this is what people don't understand. They think that this is some sort of simulation. No, it's an illusion. It is what it is. It is knowing. That's all that's here, but you're misinterpreting it.
The interesting thing I think about this, your theory, which I mean, obviously there's people have had different versions of something similar in the past and whatever, but your specific one is interesting because it can apply no matter what they discover or what they find. This could be applied as truth even no matter what we discover. So let's say we discover the many worlds theory is true, or that we find different laws that didn't apply before, or something crazy within the universe. What you're saying could still be true because it's all predicated on consciousness.
Well, so like the many worlds is very funny to me. So this would have to be an existent world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the many worlds theory, I've never heard anyone say that they don't think this is a physical material world, right? Mm-hmm. So they're saying that there's these many worlds out there. No, this is not even a world. So you can't have many worlds. This is not a world. It is consciousness. You're looking at consciousness. Now, the many worlds theory is close, but it's not. They've missed it. This is not a world. You're looking at conceptual interference, and you're taking that to be a world. And the other issue with the many worlds is, like, they say it branches off, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, these things don't branch off. Right now, it's pre-branched. Every possibility that could ever occur is occurring simultaneously right now. It's all happening. It's just that you're ignoring those. Okay? So there is no, like, wave function collapse, so they got that part right. You're just flipping concepts in and out of the composition of them with each other, and you're taking that to be what's occurring.
Well, I was going to say, like, let's apply this idea that this is a game or an illusion to specifically this universe. We could all be illusions of one person's game, and then the other worlds could be illusions of other people's games. So you and I could be the same person within this universe, but maybe in another universe, there's a whole different set of people. Does that make sense or no?
I will say no. I don't
okay.
So to me, it's like there's only consciousness.
Right, but I'm saying
one infinite consciousness is knowing every single perspective simultaneously, all at the same time.
But in one of the many worlds theories, let's say the consciousness is different or a different version of that consciousness. Do you get what I'm saying? Like there's variables within that idea. I'm just getting crazy here, but I was
I understand. But see, that's the thing is that there aren't different versions of consciousness. You don't have your own consciousness, and Seth doesn't have his own consciousness.
Right.
There's not a Seth consciousness. And
I understand that. I'm saying you and I are the same person within this universe. But let's say there's another 1,000 million bubbles out there, infinite bubbles. That those are
the same consciousness.
So that's what I'm saying. There's no possibility that it could be different consciousnesses programmed to each one of those. Okay.
Because consciousness is infinite.
Right.
And if there were two consciousnesses, one would have to end where the other begins.
Right.
So it would limit the other one.
That's true. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
You can't have two consciousnesses because they would limit each other.
Right.
There's distinguishment there. So no, there's only consciousness.
Okay.
And this is what the mind, when consciousness is knowing through the mind, it can only see things in terms of opposites. It cannot see the infinite totality. This is why when somebody says, yeah, where's God? It's the whole thing. There's nowhere it's not. That's why you can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a place where God wasn't, then you could stand on that point and then point to God. See, you can't point to God because it's all that's here. And the mind can't take that. It can't understand that. It does not.
Do you think that's why we search for, metaphysical things and paranormal things and UFOs and ghosts and
it's fun. These are fun things, right? They're fun.
Right, but do you think that
theories are fun?
Do you think that it's
a fun game?
It's us trapped within this thing, knowing that there's more, but looking for more within this thing is what I'm asking.
Here's the thing: is that it's not a trap. So just think of yourself in a prison.
Mm-hmm.
But the prison door is open, and it's been open for 30 years, and you've been serving a 30-year prison sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But the prison door has been open the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
but you've just been sitting in your cell. So you're not trapped. You can walk out anytime you want.
Right.
Okay? That's the craziness of it. There's nothing trapped there. So now the thing is that your true nature, what you really are, is not a mic. You're not limited to being a mic. You're really infinite. So you're always like, why am I never fulfilled by any object?
Right.
I have infinity over here. I can throw a 1 into it, a 2, a 3. I mean, how many numbers can I throw into infinity?
It's infinite.
I could never fill it up, right?
Right.
So how many objects can I acquire? How many concerts can I go to? How many relationships can I have?
If you were a bored god, this theory's perfect.
Yeah, but none of them would fulfill you because deep down, you're infinite.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you were a bored god, this would make 1,000% sense. And this, in terms of not wanting to repeat the same thing. So like having all these different fractals to live through or be through, or, this game or illusion or whatever. You're constantly doing different things,
So it's really one level up from that. Not only would this be a fun game to play, right? But the perfection of it is, since you are infinite, this has to be part of your infinite being. This conversation right now, in order for this being of consciousness to be infinite, this conversation right now has to occur. Now, we did not have to explore that occurrence. It could be like the blank behind me. I don't have to make it appear as a finite object, but it has to be being. It's occurring. It's just transparent. But by me setting up this talk here, putting on the computer,
right, I'm
exploring that infinite being. I'm making it look finite for myself, and I can explore it. So not only is it a fun game to play, but this is your being. This is what you are. You are this experience of having this little conversation right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's simultaneously a necessary part of your being, and it's also a way to explore something other than yourself. So it's a perfection. This is a perfection beyond perfection. It is mind-blowing. Once you really start seeing it, it will scare you because it is so perfect. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I read a lot of books and research a lot of stuff, and obviously I've looked into a lot of the main guys that work on quantum physics and quantum mechanics and, all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I like your take on it for sure. I think that it's something new and different, and I don't know. I think, like I said, I have a tenuous grasp on it, but I'll continue to, look at your videos and read your stuff. And I mean, I hope too that your stuff does get peer reviewed, or at least somebody looks at it and, if nothing else, gives you their opinion.
Yeah, well, what I have to do is write the book. So I will be working on some episodes. I really enjoy doing the episodes, so I will keep making more episodes, and then I will write the book. I'm giving
I was going to suggest that you write a book too, by the way, yeah.
I'm giving a talk in San Jose. It's called SAND 2019. So in October, I think 26th, I don't know. I think SAND starts in October 23rd, but I think I'm giving the talk on a Saturday. I will be giving a talk there on the double slit experiment. And then I'll be working on the book and things like that. This stuff is too radical. It's too huge for a paper. You can't understand it that way. And science is contextualized within physical materialism. So they see this as woo. They are being religious and classifying something as woo without testing it. And the crazy thing is they have tested it 10,000 times or more. They've done the double slit experiment, and they just cannot see actuality. They're seeing their beliefs. I was going
to say, do you think, though, that there'll come a point where we will know that by just doing all these experiments and observations and collecting all this data, that it's actually not. I mean, yeah, we'll get better medicine, and yeah, we'll do this other thing. But do you think that it'll get to a point where they'll realize, hey, this is just this vicious circle that it's this illusion that, like I said before, that, they're just observations that the future is going to behave the same way as the past within this game or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will happen. I mean, that's what the apocalypse is, right? So apocalypse does not mean fire and brimstone.
Right.
I think it means calypsos or something. I think that means uncovering.
Yeah, like lifting the veil, basically.
Yes. So the apocalypse would be where every apparent perspective realizes what they really are. And how could you have that happen simultaneously with 9 billion people? Maybe if we all had neural links all planted in our brains,
right,
and simultaneously some hacker or programmer or whatever,
right,
released you from the matrix simultaneously, you'd have one massive awakening happen, and you'd have the singularity. You would have something like that. I don't know.
Do you think this is what enlightenment is? Because obviously a lot of these
enlightenment is a very tricky topic, because what do you mean by it?
By that I mean people that have these revelations, these Buddhists and Eastern philosophy and all this stuff, that they meditate their whole lives and then they get to this one point and then they're just like, I get it, I understand.
Yeah. And so this is the thing, is I've had that moment. I've become enlightened, but then I come right back here.
Right.
So I'm back. I'm not.
It's like a trap, right?
This is no longer enlightened. Yes, I can understand that while I was enlightened for however long, okay, and now I'm back here. So everything I'm saying is limited. All limitations are by definition false, because truth is unlimited. So everything I'm telling you, these are just beliefs, and these are limited things, and this is content, and we're playing around here. Don't believe me. Figure stuff out for yourself.
Right.
Just use the content that I'm telling you to wake yourself up. When you wake up, you'll say, oh my God, I get it. Then you come back here and you say, okay, now I got it. I can't bring that enlightenment into this with me. But now that I know that all that's here is consciousness, this is the only thing that's here, I know every other person that's not me is also this consciousness. It's me in disguise. So how would you treat that other person? Mm-hmm. Are you going to treat that person terribly? You can if you want, because you know it's just you. You can cut off your own finger if you want, but are you going to do that? No. So once people wake up, once consciousness, it's not the people that is doing it. It's consciousness that's doing it itself. Consciousness is the only thing that's making distinguishments. It's the only thing that's making this content. It's the only thing knowing this content. It's the only thing that's here. So when it decides, okay, everybody's going to wake up at the same time, it'll do it. But, we're just along for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, what you said is actually interesting too, because I've had moments too where I'm like, oh, I think I got it. And then you go to bed and you wake up the next day and it's like, oh, I'm just back in life, So yeah. It's almost like that's what sleep's there for. Maybe it's part of the game to keep resetting us,
Yeah, when you realize you can't get it, you got it.
Yeah.
Because you can't get it. Because again, the thing that you can get is this finite set of interference. It's the universe. It's what you take to be as limited. But you're missing the other three interference products. You're missing the whole. Mm-hmm. So when you realize this, you're like, okay, I can never understand it as a finite object. I can get it, but by getting it, I have to be it. So in order to know the infinite, you have to become infinite. Mm-hmm. And when you're infinite, then you're not interacting with any finite people. There are no gurus walking around that are infinite. Because if they are walking around, if they are doing this, then they are finite. So they can have a lot of this is where the woo comes in, right? A lot of it is just beliefs that these people hold. Most non-dual people, non-duality is becoming, I guess, a thing now. So I guess people are waking up to it. But what they're doing is
Yeah.
they're trying to make it into a religion. It is not. I see non-dual, your typical non-dual person is like, oh, we all got to be nice to each other in fairy tales and unicorns and stuff. No, 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 no. Being nice to each other is made out of knowing that you're not being nice to each other.
Right.
The concept of peace is knowing that it's not disturbance.
Right.
So if you're really non-dual, if you really understand, then you'll look at cluster bombs being dropped on innocent civilians as pure peace. But they don't see it that way.
Well, in the sense that that would create people to then acknowledge know that that's wrong and do the opposite thing.
Yeah. When you see that there is no right and wrong because they're made out of knowing each other, when you see what really is this infinite totality, then you're really being non-dual.
So it's
You're really
really,
accepting.
but it's really like
But
duality in non-duality in the sense that you have to experience the duality to understand the non-duality. Does that make sense?
no,
Okay,
because
so like
non-duality is consciousness, and it is understanding itself as itself in itself.
right.
It doesn't need to know duality to
Right.
know itself. It knows itself intrinsically. It is knowing. So that's all it does is know.
But I'm just saying the way
It's
we
playing a game of
understand
ignoring
right.
itself
That's
by knowing duality.
what I'm saying.
Duality occurs within non-duality, but it doesn't need duality to know non-duality.
That's what I meant. Like if you look at the world today, everything's binary. It's Republican, Democrat. It's dark and light. It's good and evil. Everybody
Yep.
thinks in binary terms.
You can only think in binary terms.
Right.
That's the only way you can think. There's
Right.
no other way. All other ways are made of those ways.
Right.
So, this is how you can make a computer.
But
You have a
I think that's
one
why
and
people
a
think we're in a
zero.
computer.
No, you're not. You're
I know, but I'm just
conscious.
saying that's why people do think though that we are.
Yeah, it's a way for them to think about it, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, this is extremely interesting and extremely amusing. I love it. This has been the ride of a lifetime. I'm extremely.
I'm glad we got this to work though. This was super fascinating, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing because I think it's going to take some out of the box thinking to push this thing forward. And yeah, you should name your book "Knowing." Just just knowing.
Uh, Maybe, but yeah. See, the box that we're in is material physicalism,
Right.
and the new box that we're going to jump into is singular consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The singular consciousness box is also not the truth.
Right.
It is a framework. It is a contextualizing system of limits that will allow you to think inside that box, and the box will be conceptually understanding that all of this is consciousness. But it won't be actual. To actually understand all this consciousness, it will dissolve the illusion of all those things. So everything I'm saying is still limited. It is still not the truth.
Right.
It is just going to be conceptually true within the new paradigm.
Right.
And so that's the shift that's going to come. So we're just going to shift the game into a new paradigm. And the reason why we're going to do it, I don't know. We want to play different games. You can't, just like you couldn't have satellites in Newtonian mechanics. If you wanted to play the game of having satellites, you need Einstein's mechanics, because if you do not adjust for time dilation,
Right.
you will drive your car off a cliff.
Right.
So if consciousness wants to know, hey, I'd like to have some GPS here, you got to have Einstein. If you want to know faster than light travel or some crazy ass Star Trek type stuff, you're going to have to shift paradigms. You're going to have to align the concepts that you're knowing with actuality better than what was in the past.
So this would be like the real singularity. When by that I mean the word singularity is used for a number of things, from
Yes.
the how we're going to integrate with technology, what happens inside a black hole, all that kind of stuff.
Yes. In fact, the mathematics that I use describes a conceptual singularity. a black hole. So black hole thermodynamics is the closest I can get to describing an actual singularity, not a conceptual singularity. Black holes and things out there, trillions of black holes, those are conceptual singularities. They are occurring in the actual singularity of consciousness. The actual singularity of consciousness makes all of that content. And by us trying to figure out how black holes work, we've actually come up with great mathematics that describes the actual singularity.
Right.
Now, that description is still wrong. It is still not the truth. It is just a mathematical description that points to the truth. But it's going to be extremely powerful, because just like Newton, he was limited with what he could do. If you want to do more stuff, if you want iPhones, you need quantum mechanics.
Right.
You need to think in a different way. You need to limit consciousness in a different way to explore that content. And science should not fear non-duality. Science should not fear non-rationality, because it's going to take science to a whole nother level. Once you give up the fear of losing what you have, which you won't lose it, you'll still have it. We just still have Newtonian mechanics. In fact, it's way more easy to use it than Einstein's, because his calculations are so complex. So to do everyday little things, yeah, you still use Newtonian mechanics. And the same thing will be happening in a physics of conscious singularity. You're still going to use quantum mechanics the way it's written. It's just that you are going to understand what you're doing, how it's working.
Right.
And then you'll really be able to play with the content of your own being in new and crazy ways, which will be fun and will open up a whole new domain of science. It will be a science explosion. It's not the end of science. It's the beginning of launching science. It's the beginning of joining up with maybe enlightened beings in the universe, the illusion of enlightened beings in the universe. I mean,
right.
Have you ever wondered why you haven't met aliens? It's probably not.
I mean, it's been in the news. We've done a lot of episodes on it. There's all those sightings off the West Coast there that the Navy acknowledged they have no idea what they are. You know, it could be.
How would aliens
I'm not even saying it's alien. I'm just saying there's definitely UFOs, though.
No, but what I'm saying is when you have an understanding of actuality, when you really see it as a conscious singularity, then you know, hey, if I want to contact human beings, I can do so at any time.
It's part of the game.
I could do so at any time. They're occurring in me, as me. They would contact you through consciousness.
Right. Well, that's what we did an interview with Dr. Andrew Gallimore, who is, a computational neurobiologist, but does work with DMT, and Dr. Rick Strassman from the Spirit Molecule. And he wrote a book called Alien Information Theory, that talks about when you do DMT, maybe you're contacting people or entities, like we were talking about earlier, but also maybe through, quantum entanglement, how you could be traversing the stars through this portal kind of a thing, in that sense. So like what you're saying kind of actually does make sense, that, that would just be another step or layer within this, what we would consider reality. But let me ask you this. So if we are in this game or whatever, wouldn't it make sense to keep going the way it's going to maximize, maximize the playing field or the game?
Well, I think this is what it is. It's maximized. I mean, it's a perfection.
Right.
So what's occurring is maximizing the game for every perspective.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So
you're in a Maximus.
So wouldn't it make sense that we start on Earth? Let's just say we are the center. I'm not saying we are, but let's just say we are. That we would continue out. Maybe we go to the moon, we go to Mars, we keep, branching out to the point where it goes throughout the entire universe. Again, assuming that there's nothing already out there. But that it's like, I don't even know how you would describe, like a video game where you're building this world and you start with this most primary thing, and then you keep building on it until you've got this whole universe of stuff and things and, people and whatever.
Well, every possibility is occurring right now. So that's occurring right now. It's just that you're ignoring it.
Okay.
So you can choose to explore human beings
Right.
branching out and going all over the universe.
Right.
You can choose to explore knowing a comet obliterating the Earth and destroying everybody right now, if you wanted to. You could say, yeah, this was fun, but these guys never woke up. They were too dumb to put rockets. They were too dumb. They pointed the rockets at each other and they put nuclear warheads on them when they should have been pointing the rockets to the sky and of diverting comets that are coming towards it.
Right.
So we'll just we'll just lob a comet at them and they're all gone. Yeah, that's just fun. It's playing the same, it's playing for consciousness.
Right.
Just the same as exploring the universe.
Sure.
Consciousness it's infinite. It doesn't have attachments to any single thing. It loves and accepts all things. Otherwise, they couldn't be. The consciousness loves rapists and murderers. It loves them because they're occurring. If it didn't, they wouldn't occur. But they are a necessary part of consciousness. Consciousness does not just love and nourish good things. It loves bad things just as much. Because you would never know what a good thing was unless there was a bad thing.
Right.
So this thing is terrifying for people because they want all good and no bad. They want to exist outside of consciousness.
We've had people talk about, again, I keep going back to it, but I think it actually is relevant and should be studied more in terms of what we're talking about. But we've had people talk about their trip reports on DMT, and we've had more than a few talk about how in that realm, these entities, good, bad, everything, that they're these necessary actors that we don't understand, but they get this feeling that there is no good or bad. Everything's just this one thing, and it's all necessary for some reason beyond their knowledge.
Yeah, and the reason is it's necessary because it's infinite. That which is infinite is unlimited. So the being there of these, whatever they are, have to be there because it's infinite. This thing couldn't be infinite without the being there of all being.
Well, and then
this is just what people just cannot see as the illusion of perspectives that consciousness is knowing.
And the material physicalism aspect of it, scientists will say that, oh, that's just your brain communicating with different parts of your brain, or it's your subconscious that you don't normally get to tap into, so we've been throwing around that, like the archetypes and that kind of stuff. But like I said, your work's very interesting, and like I said, we've talked to enough people on this show, and from reading enough books and stuff, I think that you're onto something, and I think that you should continue down this road because I think it'll lead somewhere.
Oh, I have fun playing here. It's too good to be true. So, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Is there anything you want to plug? I mean, people can go to your website at sethkostek.com.
My website is just a placeholder. There's really nothing there. I'm releasing content on YouTube. I think that's the thing. If you
we have your links actually down below, so people can go.
Yeah, go to the channel, subscribe. I should be a little bit more regular about content releases, but I run an entire company, so this is like my spare time here.
Sure.
I keep an entire company running, so that's what takes up most of my time. So in my spare time, I make these videos and I write and I give little speeches about this stuff. But I love making the videos so much that I really want to dedicate more time to them. So they should be coming out more regular. After I finish this science and non-duality talk in October, which check out Science and Non-Duality. There's a lot of good content there.
Okay.
But after I finish that, then I'll release. I'll dedicate the end of the year to making these videos and getting them out there and working on the book.
Yeah, your channel's cool. I checked out. You've got shorter versions of some of the videos, but then you've got one on Schrodinger's cat and the double slit experiment, and
and that's the other little thing is that if you want short versions or short little tidbits of content, follow me on Twitter. It's at Seth Kostek, and I don't overload. I don't try to tweet out things every day. I will respond to people. So
That's actually how I found out about you too. Was we were, I think you said something. You commented about something, the Sean Carroll interview on Joe Rogan, the most recent
yeah,
one, and I checked out your page. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Because the materialism stuff doesn't really resonate with me either from things that I've experienced and stuff. So, but
yeah. I I mean, as the illusion of a human being, I don't live my life walking around saying, "Oh, it's all consciousness." I live my life like I'm a physical, material human being.
right.
I just understand what this is made of. It's
Mm-hmm.
made of consciousness. It's described by quantum physics, relativity, and holography, how this is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
If you combine those things together, um, you will have a mathematical description pointing to what's here. And that's kind of what's captured in my paper.
Yeah. Check out his paper too. You can download it on his website. Again, all of his information's down below. Subscribe to our channel. You can check us out on Patreon/Mike and Maurice. And that's it, man. Thank you for coming on, and we'll get you on again. Actually, this was fun. We'll try and make it work with the Maurice next time. He had a
Yeah, you guys should give these guys money because they need to buy more equipment. So give them money. These are great episodes. I love you, Mike, and take care. Have a good
love you too, man. Have a good one. Peace.